And so sometimes when you are in the trench and you have, resistance behind you firing at you, and you have all the tools around you, you have all the things that should be solving the problem for you, seeming not to work. Sometimes you have to get the tools out of the way, and you have to trust your instincts. What is happening, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the 52 Qs podcast. My name is Dave Kropf, and it is so good to be with you today, and I appreciate you spending part of it here with me. I hope you're doing well. I've got a great show in store for you today. Our main topic is what I can learn about production and library music from Star Wars, because this Saturday is May the 4th, which is Star Wars Day, thanks to a tortured pun. So we're going to be talking about that a little bit later, and then we are going to listen to my latest French Cafe European dramedy cue called Kropf Expectations, and so that is coming up a little bit later. But first, how has my week been? As always, it's been a super busy week getting back into the routine of things after spring break and after the family reunion and all of that stuff. And I found myself this past week listening to a few new podcasts that I hadn't heard before. And some of them sound really, really good. There's one called 20,000 Hertz. If you've not heard this podcast, it's a podcast created, and the name is escaping me, the company, but they're a sound design company. And it's basically, what if sound nerds made a podcast nerding out about sound things? And that's what 20,000 Hertz is about. They had a fantastic episode on like how the sound is put together for late night shows, how sonic brands like Hulu and Amazon Prime and Apple Plus, whenever you start the app and you hear the vroom, right? They did an episode on how those came about. They did a fantastic deep dive into remote control studios and Hans Zimmer's production company. So it's really, really good. But even beyond all of that, it sounds amazing. And did I mention this last week on the podcast? I can't remember, but the sound quality sounds really amazing. And coming off of last week where I kind of sat down and thought, okay, I want to reset how I present this podcast and the sound, and putting the headphones back on so that I can work the microphone and feel more comfortable. And so that podcast sounds really good. But even beyond all of that, I listened to another podcast, and I'll give them a shout out, because it has influenced me, which is the Sync Beast podcast. I don't know the host of the Sync Beast podcast. I'm not necessarily 100% in line with some of Graham is his host name, his approach, but he's got some really good things to say, and it also sounds really good. But one of the dangers for me when I listen to those types of things is feeling like, comparing myself. Comparing what we're doing here on the podcast, comparing how the podcast sounds, comparing how, he's running his business and how I'm running my business. And I started getting into my own head about it. And on one hand, I think it's important to kind of understand what other people in the same space are doing, whether it's running a community, running an educational platform, or even writing cues. I think it's important to know what's out there and keep kind of a bead on it. But on the other hand, I think it's dangerous when you start undermining your instincts. I think that's murky territory. And that's what I found myself doing. I found myself thinking, oh man, this guy's really good, and I need to up my game and how he presents, and it's I really got into my own head about it until I received a text from a close friend and colleague and he's not even in the same country. And so we've kind of struck up a real friendship through kind of kindness and generosity here, kind of either on YouTube or whatever. And so he's become a very trusted friend. And we had a Zoom call earlier this week and just generally hanging out. But he sent me a text kind of out of the blue, really encouraging me, and spoke right into the thing that I had started getting into my head about, which is why I call him like my quantum bro. We're just kind of, we're vibing on the same wavelength. And even though we're separated by borders, and I just appreciated that, and I needed that reminder that just do the thing that you feel called to do. Do the thing that excites you, the thing that motivates you. Because as soon as you start looking at somebody else's success or somebody else's process, you start unraveling the thing that makes you, you. And so I feel like somebody needs to hear that. I know I needed to hear that. And so getting a text kind of out of the blue reinforced that just keep doing what you're doing, Dave. Just keep doing what you're doing. And so if you're listening to this right now and maybe you're wanting to start a podcast, or maybe you hear the cues played on the podcast, and you're like, we should learn and we should take away things that can help us, things where we can improve. I'm down with that. But it's when you start comparing yourself that I think is dangerous. And so yeah, I hope that's for you. And if that's for you, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. I do read all of those comments. And so, yeah, speaking of comments, we got some good comments from last week's episode. Rod Cornholio said, I can fix most Windows problems by rebooting. That's my superpower. Yeah, don't underestimate just the power of a reboot will fix the vast majority of computer issues. Defingas said, superpower, trailer music. Dex Williams Music says, very interesting thoughts. I'm still trying to find my superpower. Keep looking, Dex. I feel you. By the way, Dex has a killer YouTube channel. You should check that out. And at GBS Workshop says, actually, I want to do symphonic music and piano concerts, but have slipped into house and techno. You made me think again. Well, appreciate those comments, and keep looking for your superpower. Keep looking for your superpower, and would still love to hear from you. Saturday is May the 4th, which has become, due to some tortured punnery, has become Star Wars Day, as in May the 4th be with you. It's really dumb, but one of my earliest childhood memories was seeing, not Star Wars. I was a little young. I was born in 73, so I was a little young for Star Wars first run in the theater. But one of my earliest movie experiences was seeing The Empire Strikes Back in theaters. And I clearly remember seeing Return of the Jedi. Now, admittedly, I bent more towards Star Trek as a kid, and into my teens, I think I subscribe a little bit more to Gene Roddenberry's utopian outlook of the future and the ultimate goal of mankind, as opposed to the slow atrophy of civilization into dystopia, which Star Wars was a little bit more. I think George Lucas was more dystopian. Gene Roddenberry was more utopian. And so the hopeful person in me wanted to be more utopian rather than kind of the cynic who was a little bit more dystopian. But like all kids of the 80s, I was enamored with Star Wars. I had the action figures, I had the play sets, I had the Darth Vader with the lightsaber that came out of his arm. I had all of those toys, And I would even make Lego starships before Lego had branded and had licensed Star Wars merchandise. That was me. I went all in on Star Wars. And so I thought, in honor of Star Wars Day, may the 4th be with you. I thought it'd be a good idea to unpack some lessons from Star Wars that we can apply to production in library music, creativity, and our careers. So the first lesson that I like to glean from Star Wars is that the Force is all around us.
For my ally is the Force, and a powerful ally it is. Life creates it, makes it grow. Its energy surrounds us and binds us. Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter. You must feel the Force around you, here, between you, me, the tree, the rock, everywhere. Yes, even between the land and the ship.
Now I'm gonna bend the concept of the Force to different concepts here, but it's all metaphor. But the Force is all around us, and for me, the Force is references. References are absolutely everywhere. Anything you watch, anything you listen to can be a reference. If you're watching TV, then maybe don't fast forward through the commercials. Listen to the commercials. And this is something that Sync Beast Graham talks about on one of his episodes. He's like, no, don't skip through the commercials. If your goal is to have music in commercials, why would you skip it? It's right there. Anything you could ever want to learn about what's getting used on television and in films is right there. References are all around us. And we're kind of living in the golden age of availability in terms of the internet. And so many production and library music catalogs are putting their entire catalog online. You can go right now and see what the big and the biggest libraries are pitching. You can see what's in their libraries. My go-to is Atomica Music. Atomica Music is a large catalog with a lot of subcatalogs, a lot of sub-publishers. It looks great. It's easy to navigate. It's got really clear waveforms. You can look by genre. You can look by application. You can look by mood, emotion. It's just really good. I love Atomica Music. I'm not necessarily associated with Atomica Music, even though a few of my cues are in the catalog through a sub-publishing deal, and that's fine. But I love what they're doing. But I can go right now and dig up a reference on any mood, emotion type of cue. If I want to see, has anybody made any hip-hop cues with bouzouki or with bagpipes? I just type in bagpipes, hip-hop, and see what happens. It's never been easier to find references. Just yesterday, I was pulling clips for an upcoming briefing room brief, and I found from scanning through Netflix, and I was able to pull clips for 36 different references that range from pensive to reflective to uplifting to light tension to dramatic tension. I can't imagine how I would have done that 10 years ago. Back when I was pulling clips when I first got started, I think I was using like a DirecTV Genie Go. You had this little box that you had to plug in and run an app. And you would have to log in to DirecTV app and then record it, and it would pull it off it was mega complicated. Before that, you had to set up a whole other computer and try to grab the broadcast feed. It really is the golden age of access to reference material. And all we have to do is tap into it. We just have to reach out. We have to turn on our ears. And we just have to listen. Actively, not passively, which in and of itself is a skill that I think takes some practice, because we're so used to just passively watching television and the music washes over us. And if the editors and the composer and the music, if they've all done their jobs, we don't even notice the music because the music is reinforcing the emotion of the scene. And good music does that. And so we have to train ourselves to resist the spell that effective storytelling will have on us. I mean, that still happens to me. I'm watching television and I'm listening to the referencing, and then I get sucked into the story. That happened yesterday, pulling those clips from like Love is Blind and The Ultimatum, those shows. I was actively watching the show to pull clips for references, and I got lost in the story. And I had to stop and say, oh, well, let's back it up and run it again, because the music was so effective at pulling me into the narrative that was happening. And good music will do that. So we have to learn how to do this. By the way, I feel like I have a workshop on this coming up on how to effectively listen to references. But it's all around us. Spotify, YouTube. If you're watching this and you're serious about a career in production music, anything beyond just kind of a hobby I'm dabbling at, you should have a subscription to at least something like Discovery Plus. I mean, this sounds really self-serving because I have queues up in Discovery, but that Discovery Plus is relatively inexpensive and it's tax deductible, right? Because if you're a composer writing music for television, it's tax deductible. But for the record, I'm not a lawyer, nor am I an accountant. Seek financial advice from professionals, not some dude on YouTube. But you should be listening to all of those things. You should be, if you want music on during Shark Week, you should be watching Shark Week. And it's never been easier to watch Shark Week. I have recently resubscribed to broadcast television. I had DirecTV for forever, got really prohibitively expensive, and I did cord cut for a long time. But have recently resubscribed to YouTube TV, and it is great. It's really, really good. And I can just set up and record all of these things. And yeah, I think that's an expense that we composers, especially TV composers, I think we should have. I think that's one of those cost of doing business things, in my opinion. And so having a YouTube TV subscription so you can see what's on. But it's never been easier. And we've never had such an embarrassment of riches. So, the first lesson that we can learn from Star Wars is the Force is all around us. All we have to do is tap into it. All we have to do is tap into it. That's lesson number 1. Lesson number 2. You will start as a Padawan and progress to being a Jedi Master. We have to start as a Padawan, hopefully without the crazy rat tail. We have to start as a Padawan as we work towards becoming a Jedi Master. And that means that it's a lifelong journey, usually with a mentor or a coach or a teacher, someone you admire, someone you look up to, someone that you respond to, somebody who resonates with you, somebody who wants to pour into you somebody for whom your success is their success. Finding the Jedi Master who is where you want to be as you grow in your own journey. Somebody who's just a future version of you. It's very tough to learn it on your own. I mean, there are people who I guess are force sensitive and know that, hey, there's, Maxi Big the Force. I promise that's the only Jar Jar line of the day. No, I can't promise that.
Oh, Maxi Big the Force.
But finding somebody who resonates with you, who can show you how to wield a lightsaber and do backflips and force push and, I guess, float through the air and float through space, Princess Leia style, I guess. That was weird. We can admit that was weird, right? But in addition to finding the Jedi that you can follow as you are a Padawan, realizing that it takes time, you should be patient with yourself, and you should count on small incremental growth, small victories, incremental wins. I have found that in my learning process, there aren't many giant, huge aha moments. There are fewer huge breakthroughs than there are marginal incremental improvements. Marginal growth, not breakthrough growth. No, those breakthrough moments might happen, and that's fantastic. One of mine was when I saw the production music form, and I had that kind of, I'm mixing movies here, but I had that kind of Neo seeing the Matrix. It's like, oh, that's all you have to do is kind of every 4 bars build and into a breakdown and build, and I can just do this over and over, and that works. That was kind of a huge light bulb moment. But things like learning EQing, learning how to mix, orchestration, how to wrangle my virtual instruments, microphone technique, learning about microphone. Those were all incremental improvements because it would be overwhelming. It would be overwhelming to sit down and try to do everything a Jedi Master can do on the first day you're in Jedi Academy, swinging your little baby lightsaber with the little ball floating around, But it's a lifelong journey. And so don't be disappointed if the huge breakthroughs haven't happened yet, or they're happening too far or too far apart, because it's a process. Be patient with yourself. And celebrate those little wins. When you have your incremental marginal growth, recognize it and celebrate it. Hey, I know this isn't a big deal, but I kind of have my brain around, what 2K sounds like on the frequency spectrum. That's a win, and that's a skill that you can build upon, for example. Because Padawans have to start with basic skills, have to start with the small things. Even Luke had to start by putting his little face shield on and holding the lightsaber and the little droid floating around like shooting lasers at him, and he's just trying to block them. He didn't start with fending off like a squadron of stormtroopers. He started with the basics and moved towards the more complex powers or techniques. But that happened through continual application, continual learning, and continual practice. But when we're in the mode of continual practice, we often overlook the incremental gains because it happens so slowly. Like a weight loss, right? You know, if you measure yourself every single day, if you're actively looking to lose weight and you're working really hard, then you're going to see incremental weight loss. But if you measure yourself every week or every month, then you really see big changes. Now, some people are motivated by, oh, I'm down half a pound. And for some people, I was like, man, I'm only down half a pound. Whereas if they weigh themselves every weekend, like, oh my, I lost 4 pounds this week. I could keep going. So, lesson number 2. You journey from Padawan to Jedi Master through finding a mentor that you can resonate with, somebody who you trust, who can come alongside you, who's a future version of you and is where you want to be and can effectively help you on your journey. And then the second part is it's going to take incremental growth that often you're too close to see, but just know that through those incremental growths comes big change that sometimes takes distance and time to recognize. So that's lesson number 2. Lesson number 3. There must be a balance in the Force. There must be a balance in the Force. Now, in Star Wars mythology, there is the dark side and the light side, and there's a Sith and there's a Jedi, and always too there are master and apprentice. I don't want to the metaphor starts falling apart if you peel it back a little bit too much. But what I mean by there must be balance in the Force is I think in order for this career to be sustainable, to be commercially successful, but also be personally satisfying, we have to find a balance between art and commerce. That's the balancing act, especially in production music. Balancing art and commerce. Because if you just focus on one or the other, then it's not sustainable. You'll burn out in some way. If you only focus on commerce, if you only focus on writing cues that are hot or are selling or are most in demand, then you might be able to knock out some cues. You might even be successful at it from a financial perspective. But you're not going to be able to do that forever. In my experience, I wouldn't be able to do it forever if I was just focusing on the types of cues that people wanted, regardless of whether I wanted to write them. But if you focus just on writing the music that you want to write, then you might feel artistically fulfilled. And you might be very happy with the results, but if nobody is buying them, then that's not sustainable either. Especially if you're looking to support yourself or a family or make extra money or for any number of reasons, any number of commercial reasons. If you're just focusing on the art, and I want to make what I want to make, others be damned, then that's fine. You're very well within your rights to do that. But just don't be upset if you're not seeing any progress towards getting on television. No more than if you just focus on the commercial aspect and just writing whatever they want. Don't be surprised if you start maybe resenting the compositional process. You start kind of dreading it because you're not enjoying it. You're not making anything that is personally satisfying. And so I think that's, if there was the biggest challenge in this industry, I think it's not finding what's hot. It's not wrangling the DAW. It's not learning how to mix. It's not finding libraries. It's not using references. It's not buying the latest plugin or the best gear or headphones or microphone. No, I think the greatest challenge in the industry, in the production music industry, is balancing art and commerce. Writing something that is personally fulfilling, that somebody needs and will pay money for. That's the gig. You can't focus on just one or the other and have a forward-moving career. Which is, that was the whole thing we talked about last week with your superpower, and finding your superpower is finding the thing that excites you and then finding a way to apply it in the production and library music space. And we have to balance that. Otherwise, we're going to burn out, or we're never going to feel successful because our music isn't getting on television. And finding that balance is what kind of number 1 and number 2 was about. Number 2, you're finding your Jedi master. That can help with that, because you might be too close to it. What is my superpower? What's my Jedi power? Can you help me bend my passion and my art towards an applicable place in the production music industry? A mentor can help with that. But as we are working towards our career, I think we should be always looking to balance it. And once it starts getting out of balance, then the clock is ticking on how long we can sustain that. At least this is my experience. This has been my experience. And this is one of the sources of my kryptonite from where now we're talking superhero. That's one of the sources of my kryptonite, is when I am out of balance and I do something or I commit to something that pushes me out of my I don't want to say comfort zone, but out of what I really want to do. And I'm doing it because I know that I could find a home for it. Then it starts feeling icky. But the only way to have a sustainable career in the industry is finding cues, writing cues that are not only commercially viable for editors and music supervisors, but also brings you some personal satisfaction as an artist. With a little a, not a capital A, but a little a. Number 4. There will always be trench runs. Trench runs. Of course, trench run being at the end of Star Wars, where they had to bomb the Death Star. And this insurmountable task that the Alliance threw resources at. But the takeaway here is there will almost always be conflicts that we, as composers and creatives, are going to have to overcome. There could be conflicts in creativity, conflicts in clients and publishers. There could be conflicts working with collaborations. You could have the best laid plans and something might go sideways. You might submit something to a library and you love it and they hate it, or they're like, let's fix this, and you have to fix it. You might be working with a collaborator and they're dragging their feet. They're not getting things back to you. You might be working against a tight deadline and you have a very small window of opportunity to hit. But there's always going to be obstacles. This is what Stephen Pressfield calls resistance in his book, The War of Art. Resistance, anything that gets in the way of you becoming a better version of yourself. Anytime you are on the precipice of a breakthrough, pushing into new things, you are met with resistance. And I'm just now realizing, wasn't the resistance in the Star Wars sequels like 7, 8, and 9? What was it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 7, 8, and 9. Those, it's called the Resistance, right? I think so. Because the ride at Disney is called like Rise of the Resistance. Interesting. I'm just now having that epiphanal moment. But Stephen Pressfield in the book, The War of Art, calls that resistance. It takes in the form of procrastination, imposter syndrome, all of those things. Things that keep you from doing what you are here to do. And so sometimes when you are in the trench and you have, resistance behind you firing at you, and you have all the tools around you, you have all the things that should be solving the problem for you, seeming not to work. Sometimes you have to get the tools out of the way, and you have to trust your instincts. You might hit the target. You might not hit the target. But if the tools are in the way, put the tools away and go for it. Take your shot. Send it along. Now, the other way to overcome conflicts is through communication. Talking. I'm trying to keep the Star Wars thing like radio chatter, right? The only way that Luke could take the shot at the end with Darth Vader on his tail was with an assist from Han Solo. Yeah, it's very Deus Ex Machina. Swoop in with the Millennium Falcon. Take your shot, kid. It's 1 in a million. Whatever. And so sometimes you need help. And the assist could just be having somebody help remove an obstacle for you. Asking for help sometimes is the biggest obstacle. That's been one of my things. I feel like I should have this all worked out myself, and I should either be a man or be a business owner or be a husband or be a teacher, and I can't show flaws or anything like that. It's okay to ask for help, because sometimes they'll just shoot Darth Vader, because sometimes they'll be the ones to take out Vader for you so you can focus and concentrate on doing what you are there to do. So that's number 4. We all have our trench runs. We just have to get in there, ask for help, receive help, sometimes get all of the things out of the way, the things which are causing resistance, and just focus and take the shot you need to take. And then number 5, and this one's a little meta, but we need to have somebody in our life, professionally, who will say no. George Lucas is a visionary. He's a very creative person. And I think that we owe a lot. Well, I guess we owe everything to George Lucas for the Star Wars universe. Would not exist without him. However, I think the prequels, episodes 1, 2, and 3, are proof of what happens when we surround ourselves with people who might not ever tell us no. If we only surround ourselves with yes men or yes women, then what we're going to end up with is something which isn't necessarily the best version of what it could have been. Like, I think for the prequels, I think George Lucas was so enamored with what could be done through technology, digital filmmaking, green screens, and all of that, was so in love with what he could do that he didn't stop to think whether he should do it this way. And I think the proof is in the performances. You look at some of the performances from the prequels, and no matter how good of an actor you are not going to get as good of a performance from a green screen room surrounded by tennis balls on sticks than if you are on a real set with a dude in a suit or a costume. That's what I believe. And for all of its faults for the sequel trilogy and the J.J. Abrams-ness of it, by the way, I think he gets a little unfairly maligned, but that's all right. For all of the grief that we've given J.J. Abrams and the follow-up sequels, one thing we could not fault them for is their passion for creating live sets, creating environments that the actors could respond to. Now, we could talk about the script and we could talk about the actual story, but those movies looked amazing. And I don't think it was about the fact that it was some 20 years of computer graphics improving. No, I think it was nobody told George Lucas no. Nobody said, hey, maybe we shouldn't do this. Maybe we shouldn't replace the Yoda puppet. Maybe we shouldn't go into the original Star Wars movies and start changing things. Maybe we shouldn't replace that Han shot first. Maybe we shouldn't change that, George. But once you get somebody who is that, yes, powerful, but I don't think it's like an ego thing. I think it's. I think everybody just got high on their own supply. I think George Lucas was such a visionary. I think he's such a magnetic leader that everybody's just jumping on board and saying yes. But I've seen like behind the scenes footage where like, hey, today we are approving the cloth that's used in the costumes. And so there would be George Lucas with, I think, like either a Sharpie or he had like Post-it notes or something. And it would be just like a wall full of costume samples. And George Lucas had to approve absolutely everything. And when you're doing that, from a creative standpoint, you are not looking to please the audience, the viewer, the fan, the 1983 Dave sitting in a movie theater with his dad eating popcorn, having indelible memories etched into their personalities. No, that's not who you're designing the costume for. You're designing the costume for George Lucas. That's just an audience of one. Is it that way because he wanted that much control? Or is it that way because people didn't trust themselves? I don't know. That's interesting. That would be an interesting topic to explore, why that was set up the way it was. But he was approving absolutely everything. So for better or worse, I think the best thing that happened to the Star Wars franchise was kind of getting it out of George Lucas's hands. Because everybody in those sequels danced to whatever waltz George Lucas was playing. And I think that is unhealthy. Now, what does that mean for us now that I've gone on my George Lucas rant? I think we have to surround ourselves with people that challenge us, that challenge our ideas, challenge our work. That's the only way we're going to grow. And that's not just finding a mentor. That's colleagues. Do you have somebody in your life that you trust who isn't necessarily, a mentor, but do you have someone who you can get candid feedback from? Honest opinions? Somebody who will tell you, no, this isn't working. Because if you don't, then you're only writing for an audience of one, and that's yourself. And I don't think that's sustainable. Not towards any level of success that's appreciable in the industry. And this is one of the reasons the 52Qs community, one of the cornerstone of the community, is feedback. In the original Facebook days, that's what the Facebook group existed to do. Weekly feedback, post your Q, give feedback, receive feedback. It's all a learning process. So if you're watching this right now and you're in the community, then go right now, go leave feedback for somebody. Go post your Q on our weekly feedback threads to receive feedback, but also to give feedback. It's this growing thing. You will learn more from leaving feedback than you really do from receiving feedback. And I think I've talked about that on the podcast. How that's the Jedi mind trick. But we've got to have somebody who's honest with us, who will correct us in love and with respect. But we can't just surround ourselves with yes people. We're not going to grow that way. We're not going. We need people to challenge us. We need people to push us. For me, that is I have a friend that I get coffee with at least once a month. Usually before class, like 6:30 in the morning, and we have real conversations. And he does correct me. He was the one who said, Dave, why aren't you wearing 52Q shirts on the podcast? I'm like, I don't know. I never dawned on me to. Shannon, Mrs. 52Qs, my wife, she also challenges me daily. And I like to think that I challenge her too, that we are bettering each other. But don't surround yourself with only people who are going to say yes. We all need correction. We all have blind spots. So find those people. Find those people who can help you on your journey, who can not just say what you want to hear, but who will actually say, no, I don't think this is working, and then give you some feedback. So those are the 5 lessons from Star Wars that I learned for production and library music. But what about you? Any of these resonate with you? And were there some that I left out? Please let me know in the comments below. I do read all those comments, and I would absolutely love to hear from you. So we are going to take a really quick break, and when we return, we are going to be checking out Crepe Expectations, which is a French cafe dramedy cue. Today's episode of the 52Qs podcast would not at all be possible without the amazing support of our family, friends, and neighbor subscribers of 52Qs, who pay their actual real-life money to keep the community, the YouTube channel, the podcast, and everything going. And as paid subscribers, they get access to the community, but also tons of extra benefits like live streams, workshops, Zoom feedback sessions, weekly office hours, Q breakdown, sounds, hundreds of hours of video archives, and, as I mentioned earlier, access to the briefing room, which is the opportunity to submit to real music libraries. Now, I'm just glad you're here today. So you don't have to pay to subscribe to any of those things, but if you're looking for a community of like-minded, positive, kind, generous composers, and you're wanting to increase your output, get serious about a career in the production music industry, then why don't you head over to 52cues.com. It is free to join, and paid memberships start at around $4 a month. Again, that's 52cues.com. That was Crepe Expectations, a French cafe dramedy cue, and you might have caught some interesting things, including some car horn sound Foley. I channeled my inner American in Paris, George Gershwin, and put some car horns in there. And that was the cue that I referenced last week, the one that I had to really push through during the live stream. So if you are a family, friends, or neighbor subscriber and you want to see this cue get put together, we have it's about 4-hour live stream that you can check out, parts 1 and part 2. And for you family and friends subscribers, I will be doing a cue breakdown of this cue tomorrow, so you can get an in-depth look into how it was put together, the sounds, and all of those types of things. But that is going to do it for me this week. And again, a huge word of thanks to the family, friends, and neighbor subscribers. Just know that I love and appreciate all of you, and to all of the folks. If you're watching this right now and you like the video, or if you're listening to the podcast on the go, then why don't you consider subscribing? I talk about library and production music every single week. And if you find this helpful, then also maybe give it a 5-star review on your podcast app, or that thumbs up there on YouTube. I know it's super cliche and tropey to ask for subscriptions and ask for thumbs up and all of that typical content creator stuff, but it really does help folks find me. And so if you found it helpful, then chances are there's somebody out there that will also find it helpful. So I would appreciate some consideration for that. But that is going to do it for me this week. Next week, you definitely want to tune in, because we are having another very special Q&A live episode, which means that the podcast itself on the audio podcast won't go out until Friday, but next Thursday, that is Thursday, May 9th, 2024 at 4 p.m. Eastern, I will be taking your questions live here on YouTube, and then we'll put the audio following that the next day. So If you want to join us live and ask a question, we'd love to have you. If you want to ask, maybe you can't attend live and you want to ask a question, then we have a Q&A thread going on over at 52Qs in the community, and you can ask your question ahead of time, and then I will answer that. But thank you again so much for joining me today. Really do appreciate you. But just remember, friends, that the universe has amazing plans just for you. Until next time, peace. The 52Qs podcast is copyright 2024 818 Studios, all rights reserved. The music played on the podcast is copyright of their respective owners and is used with permission and for educational purposes only. For more information, including joining the community or becoming a member subscriber of 52Qs, head over to 52qs.com.